That's Jefferson. Climbs the ladder. Oh, my goodness. Come
on. Is up. Jabroni JJ back here with Coop. Off a little 1 week hiatus. Apologize for being a little late. Had to finalize some MLB stuff off the last show. So appreciate you guys for being patient. What's up, K Reed, Mitch, Yeez? Happy to see you guys. And obviously, as always, folks, don't be shy in the comment section. Coop, I know we had a week off yesterday, at least from this show, but we did not have a week off from NASCAR. So how'd things go for you last week?
It was pretty rough, man. Had a 150-1 ticket on Haley to win pre-race, and then hit him 200-1 live. And knew with 5 laps left he wasn't going to win, but it was a decent sweat. But sucked because you don't often get that type of hits in any sport. So, but overall, the race was I thought fine. It was good, better than I expected. Don't know if some of that had to do with the weather, and if it was dry, if it would have been the same or not. But time will tell with that. But overall, it was a big win for NASCAR, especially short term. The viewership was great. We'll have to see how many of those viewers they can attain over the next couple weeks, especially in the Chicago Midwest type of market. So, but it was a big win for them overall.
Now, this race this week, Atlanta, which has morphed into a super speedway, I don't think it's always been one, has it?
No, man. It kind of sucks because the old Atlanta was one of the better races because, it had a lot of tire wear involved with it. And, really made the drivers, manage and drive the cars. But, that track had not been paved in multiple long times of years, and it had to happen eventually, so they just decided to went this route.
Interesting. And now for a super speedway, it's likely not going to race as one, right? Like I don't think you can go 3 wide here, or if you can, it doesn't give you as much flexibility.
You can go 3 wide. It doesn't give you a lot of flexibility. It's very dicey. The track is much tighter than the Daytona and Talladega, but you'll see a little bit of it. You won't see it. I don't want to say you might see less than what you would at Daytona or Talladega, because the way those races have been, it's just been too wide. So you might actually see more 3 wide here. Who knows?
Yeah, it is interesting. And as I'm looking, and for the folks that still don't know, Jason Hamlet over here at RPS does a free article breakdown for you guys. If you check over Run Pure Sports, just look article. It's even on the main page. You'll be able to click through his article. He gives you a lot of good data there. As for this show in particular, for those that don't know, we do run through Coop's playbook. So we do talk on, primarily a DFS show. Obviously, some bets occasionally get referenced or mentioned. But for the most part, this is a pure DFS show where Coop's going to talk through dominators. Coop's going to talk through value plays. He's going to talk through, where you can find the best place differential drivers, the medium tiers as well, and even drivers he plans to fade. And of course, I'll add in commentary as required. But as I look through some of these things early, there is some things that pop for me, Coop, and I'm sure they pop for you as well. Chalky Bubba Wallace. So that'll be fun to talk about because he's a name I love to bring up weekly. He's a guy I love to play weekly. However, I like to play him weekly because he's usually not uber chalk. This week in particular will be a bit different from where he's starting. He typically races very well in this type of format. So we'll talk on him. I'm sure he'll get a decent amount of talk up as well by yourself. But either way, anything you want to talk on note on the track in particular before we dive in?
Yeah, it's like I said, similar to Daytona and Talladega in the way that it raced from the drafting aspect, but it is tighter. It's tougher to pass. Track position means a lot more here. We can see wrecks and accidents. They could be, large, depending upon if it comes in the first third of the field. But it's different from the aspect that This is the fourth race that they've had in Atlanta, and usually at Daytona and Talladega, we're not chasing a dominator. This week, you have to chase a dominator because in the three races, the driver who lead the most laps has led 96 to 140 laps. So, just like Daytona and Talladega, they typically, get happy and just, ride around and follow each other. And there's no need to pass from second to first or third to second or third to first early in the race or mid-race. So that particular driver tends to, who is leading, chalk up quite a few laps led.
I see. Yeah, and it should be a fun one regardless. But yes, to me, this is the type of race where I know we talk on this occasionally, or more often than not, actually. But you can't eat chalk today. I mean, you can eat some of it. There's going to be accidents. There's going to be multiple drivers that don't finish this race. There's going to be multiple times where you're scratching your head wondering, how did I get here? But yes, I think that to me, we're going to talk through the chalky options, whether it's the dominators. And this is not a track where you're going to see a whole lot of love from the dominator perspective anyway, because likely going to be a lot of trading there. But even in place differential, you're going to have to pick your spots and just take chances, because otherwise there's going to be accidents. And Coop, what's your take in regards to this race in terms of what lineup construction should look like? And this will be before we go into your dominators, but what lineup construction should look like? Like, are you doing one dominator? Are you going like a few? Are you going zero? Are you going all place differential, middle tier? What do you think would be a good lineup construct for today?
Like, I did 75% with one dominator, and then the other 25% I split between a no dominator race and a two dominator race, with those two dominators, being two of the three drivers that start up front. So, if you're looking to not play a dominator, you're going to have some crazy things happen where a bunch of different drivers lead, 30, 40, 50 laps or whatever. Or you have that driver that led the majority of the laps have an accident and somehow, fall way back in the standings and lose all of his dominator points to the place differential piece too. So, I don't know. The history tells you to play one dominator. Figuring out who that second dominator is really difficult, because drivers led anywhere from 30 to 50 laps in the prior three races, and the starting positions have been, throughout the field in various spots. So, picking the first dominator, I don't want to say is easy, but it's much easier than trying to eliminate or, focus on a second dominator.
Yeah, interesting stuff there nonetheless. But let's dive right into your player pool here. Let's talk on some dominators. Who do you like at the top, and how heavy are we really going on dominators? As we've already kind of hinted at a bit, dominating laps does tend to be a bit of Russian roulette, tracks like this. But what's kind of going through your head here in regards to dominators?
Well, Amarola, Logano, and Blaney are obviously the top three for me. They have good history on this type of track. And then, if you look at the, results throughout the Atlanta races, they've done good too. So, those are the three I want to focus on, having one of in my lineups. Logano and Blaney are going to be the chalky of the three. Amarola is going to get some love, but he's not going to get, huge amount of love. I can see a lot of people wanting to fade Amarola, but it wouldn't surprise me if he goes out and leads the first 40, 50, 60 laps. It just depends upon what Blaney and Logano really want to do. If you want to take a chance at, anybody starting 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th to try to get it, go for it. But, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, so we'll talk on that a little more, though, Coop. In terms of dominators, obviously you mentioned Almirola, Blaney, Logano. Out of the three, who's probably your favorite look out of them?
Blaney.
Now, do you think, because obviously got some folks commenting in the chat, two dominators. Do you think you probably need two dominators, or you think you can go anywhere between one? I think you need at least one, but I don't know how comfortable I feel about two. What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to play two dominators, you're going to play two of the three that I had mentioned, unless you just want to throw some stabs in the dark on who that other second dominator is going to be. It could be anybody who starts 5th or 4th or 6th through, 12th or 15th, a second dominator is probably not going to be the driver that leads early in the race, but rather mid or near the end of the race. So figuring out who that is hard to do. So that's why, the majority of my lineups are just one of them. And then, if there is a second dominator in play, I hope to land on that particular one randomly.
Fair. And let's slide over to place differential, where I think you're going to see a lot of your ownership today. We sometimes talk on where dominators are important, but for most part, this track in particular, and as I have Optimizer and Sabre lined up, yeah, looks like your top 15 drivers are all 20th or further back in terms of ownership today.
Yeah. That's where all the ownership's going to lie.
Yeah, so place
minus
differential.
Blaney and Logano.
Yeah, so place differential is going to be huge today. Bubba Wallace is likely to see the bulk of it. But talk a bit on his struggles at Atlanta, Coop, because he hasn't exactly. It's a track that makes sense for him to do well at, but he hasn't exactly had the results.
He's raced better there than his results. But has he really been in contention to win? I think maybe one time. But, it's the same way. Like Daytona is his best track of the three by far, then Talladega, and then here. But he just feels so much, I guess, more comfortable at Daytona than maybe these two tracks. I don't know. But, guy has a lot of upside. And then, you got Bowman back there. You've got LaJoy back there. And there's one other driver, Chris Bell, that's going to be very chalky too. And, I don't think you can play all four of them in GPP lineups because to see all four of them score more points than any other, place differential drivers is going to be difficult. So I'm going anywhere with 1 to 2 of them in my lineups, and then I'll have a couple that have 3 of them.
Fair. Now, as we go through the board, can you maybe give us, because you have a lot of guys here in this place differential, which makes sense, right? The track's going to be filled with them. Can you give us like a top 5 guys, maybe with a little brief reason for why you kind of prefer them at their price versus maybe some of the others that are going to be chalk? And then if you can as well, Coop, not to pound you with all these questions like you're on the first 48, but maybe 1 or 2 that make the most sense for you to fade that are going to see some decent ownership.
Ones that I like that I think might go under-owned would be Michael McDowell, Kyle Busch, Eric Jones, and Daniel Suarez. And I think they're going to go under-owned because, people are going to, really load their lineups with those first 4 drivers we mentioned. So they're not going to be in nearly as many lineups. And I think, they have just as good of a chance at finishing in the top 5 and, gain place differential points as well as the drivers in the back, especially if they have issues. So I also think Kyle Busch is going to get a little under-owned, 1, because of the starting position, and 2, he's priced right next to the darling favorite of Chase Elliott. And he started right next to Chase Elliott. So people are going to, they love Chase Elliott. So they're just going to choose Chase Elliott. He's the one that I'm not going to fade, but I will be underweight on him compared to the other drivers too. I think Eric Jones, and Daniel Suarez being next to each other kind of, chop their own ownership. I think more people will lean towards Jones than what they will at Daniel Suarez this week. And then back to Michael McDowell, he does really well in this type of format. And, if you happen to watch qualifying, Ford was very dominant. He was the slowest Ford, but he was much faster than everybody else. So, and it was just 1 lap. So really, him starting 20th, I think, people aren't going to play him because of the starting position. And he has some upside to be a lower owned driver who could do well.
I'll tell you this, Christopher Bell makes a ton of sense for me on this slate in particular. I know that Bubba Wallace is going to be popular. And I'll tell you this, it's hard for someone like myself that does play Bubba every week to kind of fade him at a track that makes a ton of sense for him with his place differential. And also, let's be honest, Coop, where he's priced and where he's coming from, I mean, what does he need to land in 15th, 14th?
Yeah.
His
prices are much, so.
Basically just stay upright, right? I mean, if you told me Bubba Wallace finished this race, I'd feel pretty good. Finish this race without an accident or an issue, I'd feel pretty confident he finishes T10. But obviously that's always the concern, right? He has these random issues that seem to always occur.
And then, another interesting driver, that we seem to always end up talking about, one of your favorites is Ross Chastain. He's starting 30th, which gives him quite a bit of upside. But again, people are going to pick Bowman. They're going to pick Bell. They're going to pick, LaJoy. They're going to pick Bubba Wallace before Chastain. So I could see Chastain going a little bit, under-owned compared to those four drivers and making a nice pivot off of them or adding him with one of those four, maybe even two. But my concern with Chastain is his car's been so inconsistent from a speed perspective from week to week, and which one's going to, show up. So I think he's kind of an interesting, play that could get lost in, some people's minds, who obviously has top 10, upside. And then, the other factor too that, like do people, really, go on to this whole Ford thing of how dominant they were in practice, and maybe they don't play, those four back markers as much as what they really deserve to be playing, and being overweight on them, might be a little bit easier. I don't know. But I kind of think that whole Ford thing's kind of blown out of perspective because, if you look at the last race, they were just as dominant in qualifying, but only 3 of them finished in the top 10. Some of them wrecked out, which, hurt their chances, obviously, to have more drivers finish in the top 10. But at some point, they all got to pit multiple times, and sometimes they're not going to pit. Some drivers are going to stay out. Sometimes they're going to take 2 tires. Sometimes they're going to take no tires. So track position means a lot. So, I'm not really concerned about Chevy and Toyota being slower than Ford because they're going to make it up on the track. And, it's not like the Fords are that much faster, and it's hard to pass in some of these places.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting race to say the least, especially with how top heavy the place differential is. I'll tell you this, guys, like if you just start running an optimizer or if you just start hand building lineups, you're going to find yourself with a lot of place differential guys in your lineup. Race like this, to me, even 4 seems crazy to me. I think you need at minimum 2. Most of your lineup should have 3. Very few, if any, should have 4. Definitely no 5s and 100% no 6s. Because again, when you look at how your lineup's constructed, you're going to need a dominator. Okay. At least one dominator. Okay. You're going to need some place differentials, and you're going to need a middle tier guy that has upside to win the race. So to me, your lineup really should be 1 to 2 dominators, probably max 1, 2 to 4 place differential guys, probably max 3. And then 2 of those floating middle tier guys that'll make you pretty different. Middle tier, but when I say middle tier, I really mean guys that are mid-price that are going to be 15 to 20% owned or less to round out your lineup, because that's what's going to make you a little different. Track like this is going to be a super popular race as far as DFS lobbies go. It's a night race when nothing else is going on in the sports world. You got no Sunday night baseball. Baseball's obviously going on a hiatus. This is going to be a popular race for folks to play. Wimbledon's obviously going to be done for the day by the time this race starts. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a popular race. I would have hoped they made bigger prize pools, to be honest, Scoop, because this thing would have filled tremendously if they made, much bigger prize pools.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if you really look at the ratings, like NASCAR is the most viewed sport every weekend for the most part, except for maybe when, the Masters final round is on. But, obviously when football starts, it's, a total different story, but it's viewed more than any other sport out there. So yeah, I mean, the prize pools could definitely be bigger, but that's DraftKings for you.
Yeah, so let's move to
real quick. I think Noah Gragson and Austin Hill were kind of interesting too from a place differential, perspective. Graxon's just struggled all year. I mean, you missed last week's race, and like he was a clown, man. Like he was just spinning all over the freaking track, and it was like he spun into the tires like twice, and it was almost like the same angle both times. And then he had another incident where he spun and shit, but like he has had speed on this type of track, and he does well in general and enjoys this type of racing. So I think he could go quietly under-owned from a perspective of having a lot of upside. And I think Austin Hill too. I know Austin Hill has the name from the Xfinity piece and everything. But that Beard Motorsport oil car has not been the same as what it was when Brendan Gaughan was in it, and then the results haven't been the same. So if people look at it from that perspective and not who's driving it, Austin Hill could go on her own. But I do like Gragson over Hill from a pivot perspective.
Oh, good stuff. Good stuff nonetheless. And obviously, folks in the chat, if you have any questions or whatnot, happy to make sure we grab them for you. Terry Niehaus 77 car could have some good. Yeah. All right, so we'll move on. So I actually like this new section, Coop, that you have here, because this is not obviously a common section for this playbook. Lower owned, riskier play drivers who have just as much upside as downside. And let's be honest, when you're playing NASCAR, it's not like you're enjoying cash games in NASCAR. You're not really enjoying your 50-50s. You're not enjoying your head-to-heads. Too much variance, right? But MMEs, these are the types of drivers today that could win you the tournament. So, Coop, obviously an interesting category here for you today. I know why you did it being a high-variance track. Who do you like here?
Yeah, these are the drivers that are going to be, lower owned, who have some upside. But, due to the starting position, they also carry a lot of downside, especially if they get involved in an accident early. But they're the difference makers, like you said, who could, end up being in a GPP winning lineup for you if it all curtails in the right way. And to be honest with you, there's some solid names in here. Denny Hamlin starting 14th, probably not going to get much action because of his, starting position pertaining to all these other drivers. And, he could sneak up there, finish in the top 3-4. Some of these other drivers behind, have issue. He could be like the 4th, 5th best place differential score on the slate at, not much ownership. Same with William Byron. He could do the same. I think the riskiest driver and probably the lowest owned is going to be Tyler Reddick. Starts 12th. And, he struggled at these type of races in the past. And if people really combine that with his starting position, you could get a really low owned Tyler Reddick. And, again, who's to say he can't get up there and do what, any of these other drivers can. So you don't have to play a lot of these drivers to be equal to the field or overweight on them. But, they're going to make your chalkier lineups much different. And if they do succeed, you're going to be farther ahead of the field than, your peers. Justin Haley's another one, starting 17th. I don't know how much action he's going to get, from that starting position. And, he does very well in this type of racing environment. So I like him. And the last one is Martin Truex. And, he struggled on these type of tracks for years, but since this new car has arrived, he seems to be much more comfortable and has done well with them. I wouldn't go loading up your lineups with these drivers. The majority of mine will have one. I'll have a couple that might have two of these drivers in them. But, we have seen drivers start 12th and 14th, I think is what it was, who have been that second dominator. And these are the guys that also, are willing to take chances of maybe staying out to get track position or pitting early to kind of get track position at the next caution or whatever, or taking 0 tires or 2 tires, because like Denny Hamlin has a win, he's secure. William Byron has wins, he's secure for the playoffs. Martin Truex has wins, he's secured for the playoffs. So they're drivers who, have the ability to play, the strategy game.
No, I love it. I think that, as I mentioned even before you started speaking on this segment, like this is where you're going to win this race. In terms of ownership, some of these guys that you've mentioned, they're just not crazy numbers. I mean, sure, some of them are a little high, but for the most part, these are guys, Tyler Reddick, 13%. I mean, how often are you going to get him on these types of races where he's that low? Even a guy like Haley, I'm trying to see how far up he is. So Haley, another guy, 13, 14, 15%. Yeah, I mean,
the one thing that I think might get a little bit more ownership on Haley is, like, if you look at a lot of the cheaper drivers, they qualified better than what, is anticipated, and they're going to have, lower ownership. So Haley could sneak up in there and be a little bit higher than maybe what we expect. But, he's a nice pivot off of like a Corey LaJoie or an Austin Dillon, type of driver.
No, I like it. I mean, like I said, to me, obviously being a guy who likes to pivot and be different, I think this is the section where you practically win the race. Now, before we go to fades, Coop, on your end, obviously we've been going through this relatively quick for our standards. What are maybe one or two things from a lineup build perspective, maybe that people aren't thinking about, that maybe you're doing, or maybe you're thinking about doing something a little maybe untraditional? Because look, it's a non-traditional track, right? So
Right.
What are you doing from a perspective of trying to be a little different with lineup construction?
Like this, you always talk about like team racing at Daytona and Talladega, and it plays out until the final stage where they go up with their teammates or their manufacturer. And in that final stage, I mean, it's just, you're fighting for the win. It's all, what you want to do. And it really never plays out because they always have the big accidents and stuff, and it jumbles it up. Whereas here, you don't have that big accident. So I don't mind playing like teams together, or don't mind playing manufacturer stacked together. Like, I think, like, an interesting thing to do is like take some shots on Toyota, and stack, Reddick, stack Wallace. Stack Reddick, Truex, and Denny Hamlin. And then you could still stack Chris Bell and Bubba Wallace. You could have 5 Toyotas, and they're going to be different because you have Reddick and Hamlin and Truex. Not many people are going to do that, if any. Same kind of way with Hendrick, with Byron and, Elliott. So I think more so this race than the other races, and you can actually see it kind of play out more, is the manufacturer and the team aspect. Because like in the Xfinity race, you saw it with Colleague racing yesterday. They all got up there, they did well. Last year in this race, you've seen it from, a Ford perspective with Penske. So, I wouldn't count out like a Toyota stack or something like that. And like Toyota was doing pretty good here last year too, to be quite honest with you, until they had some incidents.
Yeah, I think obviously from a lineup construction standpoint, you have so many different options, and obviously all we can do for you guys all watching is kind of what's going on through our head and how we're approaching, a track like this. So Coop, we'll move over to the last section for you, complete fades. I know we've spoken on a few fades, maybe guys are going to be lower owned on, but we already talked on the added variance that this track brings, and there will be cautions. Okay. They're just inevitable, right? And cautions will breed chalky guys going under. So from a fade perspective, who are we looking to really get away from? Even on the chalkier end, who are we looking to get away from?
Like the cars starting up front after the first, 4, the Larsons, Harvicks, the drivers starting 5th to really like 9th and 10th, are going to be the fades for me because, I don't see them getting up and earning dominator points, unless it's like a secondary dominator, or they don't have the place differential upside that these other drivers have. They carry a lot more downside. So I'm going to do that. And then I guess the two biggest fades from a chalk perspective for me, I think Brett Keselowski is going to get some ownership, and I know Chris Buescher is going to get some ownership. And, you know, they've done well here in the past at this type of racing. Keselowski finished second in the spring, and he, you know, led some laps. But the thing, like, I know it was only one lap, but their cars didn't handle that well in that one lap. And they didn't show the speed that they had earlier in the year. And they're a team that usually, when they do well, that's because they qualified well. So, you know, I think, again, Keselowski and Buescher starting 11th and 15th, they're going to take ownership away from like that Denny Hamlin, that Martin Truex, you know, Will Byron, even Tyler Reddick type of play. I expect them to be more popular than, you know, all four of those drivers. So those would be my big, you know, fades from an ownership perspective.
The interesting thing for me with this, Kyle Larson, 12%-ish today. Does that sound right?
I would be surprised if he's 10%.
Which is
starting
interesting,
like
right?
7th or 8th.
Because when we talk about guys with upside and who do we play, who do we not play, man, doesn't that just feel like
he showed that he had speed. He was the fastest Chevy out there, you know. And in most instances, he was faster by quite a bit. You know, this race really comes down to handling, and you know, his car seemed to handle, you know, so much better than the other Chevys that were out there. So, you know, I think if Larson gets up there and somehow leads 15, 20 laps and then gets another 10 laps of fastest laps and finishes second, you know, he could definitely sneak it in for you. But it's got to be the perfect scenario.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Like, at his ownership, I don't even know how perfect it'd have to be. But, like, here's the thing. If he wins and leads some laps, like, the dude's going to be in the optimal.
Exactly. And
this probably as low as you're going to get Larson in a field like this. So, yeah, you know, consider me overweight there. And look, Coop, any final notes that you want to bring up for this track and I guess, you know, the race in general? Obviously, we get a little night race action, which is always fun. Yeah. Also, weather.
I know at some point there was some rain forecasted, and I still think there is rain forecasted. So pay attention to that. And the reason I say that is because if for whatever reason this race would get postponed, it would be tomorrow. It would be during the day more than likely, and it would be very hot, and the track would be very slick. I would expect a bunch more accidents than what we would see, you know, this evening. So that would want to make me play even more place differential.
Yeah, and look, let's be honest, right? That makes a good amount of sense. So, guys, I guess look, without further ado, obviously we got a lot of time before this race starts, almost 5.5, 6 hours ish. So look, I wish you guys all the best on this lovely Sunday. Make sure you enter your contest though, because these puppies will fill up. Again, I wish they made these bigger pools because there would have been undoubted bigger pools would have filled up today. But with all that said, I hope you all gamble responsibly, stay safe, and as always, run pure. We'll see you guys next week.